What's up, Greg?
Zach, we were supposed to be getting someone from Red Hat, except we got an email about 2 hours ago saying that he had a family emergency, so he wasn't sure if he was going to be here today. He might have to delay to next week.
Oh man, I hope he's okay. His family's all right.
It seemed too critical, just very urgent.
Sure. Okay.
I wasn't sure if we were going to get anyone else or not. I don't have a ton for this. I've been working on downstream testing stuff mostly last week, so nothing to talk about here really.
Okay. Yeah, I've been working on wrapping up my product stuff, so I haven't been able to do much lately. Um, Kier, I'm glad you're here. I'm really sorry. I have not been very responsive at all lately. Uh, Combination of
Oh,
being,
it's okay.
yeah, I was busy with product stuff and then on PTO for a few days, but I'm alive. Um, so you're having an issue with, was it workers?
Uh, yeah, we figured out that you are deploying the workers in some semi-manual way.
Yeah.
So, um, and just was trying to figure out how do you do this? Do you use a service or just logging in a machine and just running the script and it runs in background? And what if they die? You the what do you do usually? But no, I just understand that it will not be helpful for us, and we need to invent something for deploying testing instance of the tautology.
Yeah, the way that workers are managed is really um, kind of terrible. And if they die, they just stay dead. So someone has to notice. Um, and yeah, it's not good. Um, I'm
Yeah, and
unsure though, like how if there's even a way to, for example, build a system D service whose job is to launch and monitor, end processes. I haven't actually done a ton with system D unit files. Um,
there is a service um, like System B, System 5. I mean, it's used for used by tautology OpenStack CLI, and it's deployed to some to some uh, Ubuntu's machine, and its setup is pretty different. But what I'm trying to use right now, it doesn't use systemd. I mean, it uses systemd because it's just the same ways as the Ceph Ansible does. Like it utilizes the roles, and it's different from tautology OpenStack. But and I've patched this system V script, init script that uh, that it allowed to restart dead workers only. Uh, and I'm not sure if we can reuse this as a workaround, for temporary workaround until we found better solution for managing workers. Uh, we we we've talked sometime with Nathan that it's probably better to implement a standalone application for or just embed them to paddles or a separate service which will can dynamically start workers or halt them. Uh,
yeah,
but
that's kind of like the best idea that I had about making this a little bit better, um, but it never bubbled up in the list of priorities. I'd be curious to see what you have for the System 5 script. Um,
Yeah, I just landed this. You merged this. Don't remember you or Gregory merged this ticket, but yeah. But the problem is that the workers and by I mean this init file is for tautology OpenStack and CLI, and it's deploying everything within the. I mean all services within the one user tautology. Oh no, it's user Ubuntu and deploys, and this init file is managing all of them, and pedals, pulpito, workers,
Oh,
everything in one script. So, yeah, and we discussed with Nate, and it's one of the things that I'm trying to. I will work in the near future is to create a replacement for this script. I mean for uh, there's a setup script, shell script, and we agreed um, that we need to replace with some Ansible one. And yeah, we can split these workers.
Yeah, if I can just comment, the setup script that Kira is talking about is of course only used to set up Tautology OpenStack, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah,
but what Kira is working on, he explained it to me yesterday. It seems what he's working on is an Ansible recipe that would deploy a full tautology environment in OVH, which seems to me to be a hugely useful thing
Mhm.
because we could build on that, build integration tests on that.
Yeah. So is that work being done in Ceph Ansible?
yeah, partly yes,
Okay.
but yeah. So I I have some patches for OpenSUSE, but it's still not working. Uh, but I think if we produce for the next step, we need to separate Ansible script probably, but it's under discussion. You continue, uh, I mean, to have separate Ansible for deployment tautology testing, or to just have CM Ansible, and or what's best.
My knee-jerk reaction was to make it a separate entity. What do you guys think?
What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, Ceph CM Ansible is used to provision the machines, right? The target machines.
Well, we have roles that deploy paddles and pulpito and do a lot of the groundwork to set up a tautology deployment as well. Um, there is kind of like a last mile issue where it it doesn't get you 100% of the way there, but it could be extended. Like if we wrote, if we had a service that for example managed tautology worker processes, the tautology role that we have in Ceph CM Ansible could be extended to say ship a systemd unit file for the service, um, and tell the system to enable it. Um, so we what I'm getting at is we could use Ceph CM Ansible for this from what I understand, to be the goal. We wouldn't have to, but yeah, Ceph CM Ansible isn't quite just used for provisioning our machines. It's kind of a collection of roles that we keep all of the. Let me see. I don't think this is a lie. I think we keep all of the Ansible that is relevant for managing our lab in that repository. Um, and things like paddles and pulpito and Teuthology are part of that.
I guess the reasoning behind mine, and like I say, it's a totally knee-jerk kind of a thing. There's no fundamental analysis behind it, but my feeling is that StephCM Ansible, like you say, it's used to set up your lab. But I wonder if the testing lab in OVH, there's obviously going to be some difference, right? Or some differences, or can it be exactly the same as the Ceph lab?
Well,
I mean, there's probably some dependencies on services that are not set up by StephCM, ENS, for example.
So let's see. Yeah, we certainly assume that DNS exists in the lab that we're deploying on. That said, I'm not sure. I kind of doubt if there are a lot of other dependencies that could cause problems there. We were pretty careful to, when we started the CephCM Ansible project, because we didn't use Ansible forever. And when we started using it, we put a lot of effort into keeping the configuration separate from the actual machinery of deploying things. And the intent there was that it could be used by other labs. And we do use it in multiple labs, right? Because we have the Sepia one and we have the Red Hat internal lab that we use for a lot of downstream stuff. And CephCM Ansible manages both of those. And the difference between the way those two deployments work is each lab has a different, what we call secrets repository. Not everything stored in the repository is a secret, but if there are passwords or whatever, those get stored in Ansible Vault, encrypted. But the rest of it is just a hierarchy of inventory and group bars and stuff. So we point Ansible at that inventory that's stored in the secrets repository, and that's how it gets the configuration for the different labs. Something like that ought to be possible.
Yeah, right, possible, but is it feasible? For example, when we're working on this, right, and our stated objective is to get this, to be deploying Teuthology, in OVH. Right? And let's say, we did all of this work and we, open 15 PRs, to CephCM Ansible to make it work. Isn't there going to be some trepidation, on your part to merging PRs because your CephCM Ansible is so important to your infrastructure? That's kind of a concern also that we have. I have.
Another point that I think that's a big advantage to have Ansible script in the Teuthology repo instead of somewhere else. So that will be much easier just for deployment and managing the source code.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair point.
Also, I don't know how it's. Sometimes the setup for requires some prerequisites, like some recalculations that should be done before applying Ansible playbook, for example, just for evaluating or just listing the resources automatically. Like, for example, if we are trying to deploy a Teuthology instance with access to separate OVH, not OVH, but several OpenStack instances, then we have to pre-store somewhere the configuration, which will ask from OpenStack which network it provides. so we can generate all the nodes to be published to panels. So this is some of the stuff that should be implemented somewhere, but doing this on the side, on the Ansible control, it's not reasonable for me. And it's possible to do, but it's too much effort, I think, instead of just coding it in Python. So.
Yeah, I mean, certainly tools, tools that don't make sense to be written in Ansible can be written in Python. Absolutely. Those tools can be run from Ansible if necessary, or manually or some other way. But so real quick to answer Nathan's question about how worried we would be about merging Ceph Ansible pull requests. I think we'd be more interested in having even a small community around the Ceph Ansible stuff than we would be worried about merging stuff. So I may be super hamstrung for time these days, but our sysadmin, David Galloway, sometimes you'll see him talk in the Sepia channel, for example. He's the one putting most of the work into Ceph Ansible these days. He's a good reviewer. He's a patient guy. He's easy to work with, and I think that that we could make an acceptable process around Ceph Ansible pull requests if people were motivated to submit them. I'm not gonna like tell anyone they have to, right? But we would look at them, and we would want the repo to work for other people if at all possible.
Right. So that's great, and just to make sure we're on the same page about the objective. In my mind, the objective is to have what we don't have now, which is a button that we can push that deploys Truthology to the cloud from the WIP branch, and puts it through its paces so that we can say, cool, this PR is safe. We can merge it.
Yep.
Something like the equivalent of a suite of integration tests. And in that sense, I kind of sympathize with Keir's opinion that it would be worth considering to move the Ansible stuff into the Truthology repo.
Yeah, no, I feel similarly. I think that it might be better if and same for Paddles and Pulpito. If I think that yeah, when we started doing this, there didn't seem to be a way to make that work smoothly, because we wanted to have a repo that we wanted to have a place where we could run everything from. We didn't necessarily care if if these roles, if their primary residence was in one repo, but there wasn't, at least at the time, a way to what's the term I'm even looking for here? But
monolithic repo.
There wasn't a way to at the time to avoid having a monolithic repo, but maybe other people have had this problem. Maybe there's a solution now. I would certainly, at least personally, I'd be really open to, like, if we found a way that we could continue to run the roles in the way that we're doing now, while also having the roles actually live in different repos in the projects that they actually deploy.
Well, I'm confused because we don't have a monolithic repo right now, right? Like, we have Ceph Ansible and Truthology repositories that are separate.
Right, I'm kind of arguing for a monolithic repo, to have Ceph Ansible, as you say, Zach, Paddles, Pulpito, move all of that to the Truthology the same way that the Ceph QA suite was moved to Ceph.
Well, yeah. So I guess, all right. So when I heard monolithic, I was thinking of the other pattern where all of the Ansible roles are in one repo. That sort of monolithic. Um, but I see your point now, and no, and again, I agree that it would be nice if like the Toothology role was in the Toothology repository. Um, I would argue that for Paddles and Pulpito, that they should go in those roles should go into the Paddles and Pulpito repositories. Um, it just that makes a little more logical sense to me. If we can figure out a way to do those things and still have a way to run, like if there's a way to almost like symlink them into the CephCM Ansible repository, but not actually a symlink. I'm describing something that I don't even know if it exists.
Well, we're talking about two different things, though. I'm talking about making what maybe you haven't even considered, but in the interest of being able to integration test the system as a whole, it would make sense to have the whole system in a single repo. And by the whole system, I mean Toothology, CephCM Ansible, Paddles, Pulpito, all of that in a single repo, so that we can open a pull request and run integration tests on it and merge it. But I'm not saying it's impossible to keep them in separate repos. I'm just saying it would be easier from an integration testing point of view.
Yeah,
and also versioning and implementing some kind of a like we have in Ceph, like a master and then a stable, two different code streams, so that we can be doing development in master, but using a stable version.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, is versioning, right? Toothology doesn't have any versioning.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. The ideas of having a stable branch alongside master and using some kind of versioning, those would obviously be really beneficial to have. I'm not totally sold on the idea of putting all the projects in one repo, though.
We can just link pedals and Pulpito as a sub project, a sub repo to Toothology.
Yeah, possibly.
That's possible.
Possibly. Yeah, it's just that. So I kind of feel like Toothology as it is a bit larger than it ought to be, or that it needs to be, and the direction that I personally feel like it would benefit from going in is actually more modularization, picking out some of the pieces of it that are logically separate and moving them into separate projects or or Python libraries, so that you can change one piece without having to worry so much about the other. That would, of course, require having like better defined interfaces and stuff. But that's kind of where my head has been at. So moving them all into one is kind of the other direction, Does that make sense?
Well, I'm just thinking of it in terms of integration testing from a practical standpoint. You can have separate projects, but they don't necessarily have to be implemented in separate repos. They could be implemented in separate directories, right? In a single repo. But I mean, I don't want to have a long debate, but there definitely would have to be some kind of versioning, so that and like Keir said, some way to define, like which version of Pulpito is this version of Toothology designed to use, and then it can just install that version. So sure, make it as a Python module, that's also a way to do it. But over time, I've come to appreciate the fact, Ceph is this huge monolithic thing. I've come to appreciate the stability of having almost the entire system in a single repo.
Yeah,
And
there are certain.
submodules are also possible, another way of implementing.
Yeah, I think doing it with sub modules could possibly make all of us happy here. Yeah, and I agree with you about Ceph. It works pretty well for Ceph as far as I see, to have everything in one repo.
Yeah, from a maintenance point of view and integration testing.
So when you say integration testing, Nathan, are you thinking like just because it integrates nicely with the GitHub PR interface, or?
Oh no. I'm
what are you going
for? I'm talking about I open a PR, right, in any one of these modules, any one of these repos, Pulpito, Paddles, Zoology, CephCM, Ansible. I open a PR, and today we don't really have a way of telling whether that PR is safe to merge. We don't have a button that we could press anywhere, which would deploy Zoology from that particular branch, from a work in progress branch, and put it through its paces. We have to roll it out in Ceph in order to find out whether it breaks anything.
And I'm not opposed to monolithic repos by any means. I'm not sure how a monolithic repo really helps with that specific problem.
Well, it puts all of the code in one place, but I'm not insisting on that.
Well, we could potentially do something similar, even if they were not all in the same repo, right? If just as one idea, if the Teethology repo had a way of describing what versions of, say, Paddles and Pulpito and anything else it might need, then
it's basically one of the things that we need to provide for Ansible scripts, at least. I don't know if you guys are already providing this, but when I was thinking about creating a separate Ansible for deploying Teethology, I would suggest to have a single property file, not spread it along all the roles, but one property file where listed all the versions that should be deployed to the cluster. So like a snapshot.
Yeah, that would work. But we have to talk then about versioning, right? In all of these different repos. So each repo has to have a versioning mechanism, and then a way, or if we use GitHub, if we use a single master branch, then we have to have a tag, way of tagging. But that's versioning, right? Tags.
Yeah, I'm just saying about parameterization of the existing roles, because right now they are just all checking out master and some hard-coded repo URLs. It's not very usable for development because
we can. It would certainly be possible in, for example, the Ansible roles that we have right now to abstract out the repositories, and it would also be possible to tell, say the excuse me, the Ansible Git module to check out a certain branch or tag or SHA-1. So whatever versioning we use, we can make Ansible check out that version. I mean, that's going to be fine, right? Those things may not be parameterized right now, but that could certainly happen, And then a way that we could accomplish, just telling you what would be possible if someone spent just a few hours on it or maybe less. Um, when we went to do integration testing, we could slap together or maintain and modify an Ansible inventory that contained the configuration that we wanted to use, um, for the test to deployment, and then run. Like today, it would be the Ceph CM Ansible roles. A different, in the future, it could be, the roles exist in the repositories of the projects or whatever. But the point is, we could maintain a single inventory configuration that we pointed these roles at wherever they live, and it could contain things like, well, use this repository, use this version, set these other parameters. Does that make sense?
I'm not an Ansible person. Kira would have to reply to that.
Okay.
I can reply right now. Just need to think a little bit about it. But it sounds, yeah, just one small point is that it's pretty hard to put everything right now into this single thing, because in order to deploy everything, you need to check out several repos, and you have to bound it in one place. So the management is pretty tricky right now.
So what do you mean by that? To deploy, you have to check out.
So in order to deploy the tautology right now, you need to check out Ceph CM Ansible, and then check out somewhere a security repo, right? And somewhere should be stored inventory in another one repo.
No. So the way the pattern that we're using is we have the Ceph CM Ansible repo, and then for each of our labs, we use what we call a secrets repository, which contains the inventory. We called it secrets because we just wanted to remind ourselves whenever we talked about the repos that there are encrypted secrets. There happen to be encrypted secrets in them. Those are not related to Teuthology or Paddles or Pulpito, except for maybe there's like a database password somewhere. But the encryption of anything is optional in these things. If we wanted to create a repository that we used for a testing lab, I'm doing air quotes right now, we could do that. We also wouldn't have to store a testing inventory in a separate repository at all. It could be in the Teuthology repository.
It's basically it makes sense, but okay.
I'm only describing what would be possible.
All I'm saying right now is that it is currently not usable for newcomers. So, because let's say you're a newbie and you want to set up a tautology. So what's your steps to set up your own instance? It's disaster because you need so many pieces. It's it's not just about just check out tautology and then run some script and it will roll up all the setup with everything.
Yeah, that's what Loic's work was trying to address. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a problem. Just
yeah, I agree.
And this is very related to the integration tests, because integration tests shouldn't be so complicated for setting up environment, because it just needs to run some basic command, so it will run everything for you. And I understand it's not possible right now to make it so easy, but we have to subtract all complicated stuff. At least we need to have some basic scenario which should be should require minimal thought for deploying.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. So I also had some questions. No, so if I have some changes currently, they are just part of them. It's I'm just in the middle of the work. Can I merge it to Ceph Ansible, like support for um, OpenSUSE? So it's because it's becomes more and more changes.
So is this, you said this is work in Ceph Ansible?
Yeah,
Ceph CM Ansible, I think you
Ceph
mean.
CM Ansible. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's also a Ceph Ansible project
Oh
here, which is the equivalent of DeepC in the Red Hat universe.
no, I know nothing about this. So just
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Yeah, if you have changes that you would like to go into our Ceph CM Ansible, yeah, please file a pull request and we'll take a look.
yeah, I just don't want to store them into my private repos. So it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, okay.
Yeah, please file a pull
Another,
request and
yeah,
yeah, it will get looked at.
and
And
back to the
just
unit
to,
tests.
okay. Oh, no,
Back to
before we
the
go to the unit tests,
okay.
before we go to the unit test, could I just, so we can make a conclusion here? We agree that it would be desirable then to, for Qthology, Paddles, Pulpito, I don't know about Ceph CM Ansible, but those three Python projects to turn them into, implement a setup.py or modularization. Is that something we can agree is desirable so that we
Oh,
can start doing versioning?
yeah,
Is that
let's make sure we're agreeing on, make sure we're on the
yeah,
same page about what we're agreeing on. So you're proposing um, that we fix up our packaging and start doing some versioning. That's one
yeah.
part of it. Um,
Well, that was my understanding is we need to be able to version. Are we going to use the submodules or are we going to use a pip to install this stuff?
um, see, I'm unsure if if we'll be able to for example, deploy any of these with a simple pip invocation. Um, but we might be able to. I think it would be worth looking at. Um,
Or, or will pip to install it and then another command to deploy it? But right now, it seems like everything is designed, to check out the tip of the master branch. So,
yeah,
so I'm trying to get to an actionable conclusion.
yes, totally.
Right.
I I think it would be a good idea to look at least using pip to install these things, and if we do need further action to be taken, um, then we can start doing that in Ansible. I'm not married to the idea of using git clone to deploy things, right? So yeah, let's look at making these things more usable via pip. I think I totally agree there.
Seems like I know why you like to have everything installed separately because Pulpito, Pedals, and Tautology are deployed on the production on separate users, and they are checked out the source code into corresponding directory.
Yeah,
So, but
we like to keep different users for different services,
yeah,
just as like
but
a decent basic security practice.
Yeah, but there was another idea. I don't know if Nathan was sounded it, not about uh, packaging the tautology itself as a distributable RPM, and the same for pulpit and pedals. So you don't need to check out them to the, you know, to the separate user directories. You just can install it to the system.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, if someone wanted to work on spec files, we could also have that as an option. I don't see why not. I do still think it would probably be worth making them work with pip, but
It's actually can work with pip or Ansible or whatever.
Mhm.
Just the thing is that we can, yeah, you know, it. I don't a strong opinion how should we go with you know, development setup and production, if they should be different or if they can be different, like like uh, you have production and you have separate users, but for development it's not so important to have different users, right? And you can everything install via pip command in virtual environment and running everything there. So
Yeah, certainly for testing, we could use, you know, the same user. I think that, I mean, whether you used pip or RPM, you can install things globally. And you can then choose to run things as separate users or not. Um, if it makes things a lot easier, maybe for testing we run everything as the same user. I don't have strong
But
opinions there.
pip and RPM aren't mutually exclusive, right? There's
Exactly.
plenty of pip modules that are then packaged as RPMs.
Yeah. I think we could do both if I were setting priorities, which I'm not necessarily, right? If I were, I would rather see pip done first, but you know, either can work.
I agree with that sentiment. Yeah. Because Toothology is already using pip, you know, to bring in all of its dependencies, right?
Right, right.
So it's a logical extension of that.
So if we're going to do a single deploy script based on either pip or RPM, do we just want to leave that in the Toothology repo, or do we need to set up a new repo that you can build that you can like use to pull in submodules? Or I just want
I'm
to know
not
if I
sure.
need to do anything other than wildly merged PRs that haven't been tested as much because we don't have any testing.
We're trying to get to the testing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, so I would say your question, Greg, I would say we cross that bridge when we get there. Um, I don't think that decision would have to be made before we get, for example, things working with pip. Um, I'm just not sure if we know the answer to that question yet. Like how do other projects handle integration testing across different projects? We can't be the first people to think of this as an issue.
well, it depends on how actually different they are. I mean, the thing I know of is Zool that OpenStack uses, where it gates on merges across everything. We're not going to
Right.
set up a Zool instance to support Toothology testing.
True
So it
enough.
could be that the model we use, well, I mean, you know, we don't have any testing right now, so obviously we don't have anything to gate on anyway. It could be that the model we use is just like we have our separate repos, and then there's a like aggregation repo that just points to different SHA-1s with submodules, and we like get all the stuff in the repos, and then the real commit is when we change the SHA-1, and that like runs tests.
I like that idea. Aggregation.
Yeah.
And so that would be,
And then
you'd say, an aggregation repo with just contains pointers, or it would be a set of submodules, basically.
yeah, or and maybe your setup.py script. I don't know, but
Right. Submodules are setup.py or whatever.
Yeah.
It could also, I'm just throwing ideas out here. It could also be where certain Ansible things are stored. There could be docs there for this is the, this is the new landing page for I want to set up a Toothology lab.
Yeah. So this is why I ask if I should like be getting a repo on GitHub for this or not.
Right, but then we're faced with what are we going to call it?
Oh yeah, we could do some serious bike shedding there.
This model of development and integration is worth if we have several components that can be run separately. But the pulpito or pedals, it's not kind of something that can be executed separately. So
now we're getting back to my idea of putting it all together in one.
Yeah, just like references to. But anyway, I'm not sure that.
But I understand that
this is a topic that we have to decide right now. So it can.
Well, it sounds to me like the decision Zach has made it clear he prefers to keep it separate. So let's keep it separate.
Well, and it's not just because I think that smells better or anything. I mean, picture you're a brand new, you're someone who say just started looking at Ceph and Ceph testing, for example, and you just started looking at Toothology. Right now, I think it's really intimidating. I think it's more intimidating if when you clone the repo or whatever, now you have every service that's even related to Toothology, and it feels like you have to understand them as well.
But you do have to understand them, Zach. You can't run Toothology without paddles and pulpito.
Absolutely.
Or can you? And that gets to my question about interactive a couple lines down in the minutes. Is there a way to run Toothology kind of in a minimal way without the workers and without suites? Can you run a single job? That's something that this idea of running a single job.
Probably initially you could run, but right now the worker, only worker, which will just can accept fake suites from beanstalk.d. But whenever it's run, it tries to connect to pedals, and if pedals is not running, it will break all the tests. It's not possible right now to run any tests without pedals.
Right, so if it were possible to use Toothology without paddles and pulpito, then what you say, Zach, makes a lot of sense. To make it less intimidating. Here is this is the minimal way to run Toothology, all on the command line. There's no dashboard.
Yeah.
And then the dashboard stuff and the database stuff and all of this heavy duty lab stuff can be on top of that. As where you want to set up your own lab, okay, well that's the next step. After you've started running Toothology, this minimal Toothology. But that doesn't exist yet, is my understanding.
Yeah, that may or may not work today. Well, Kier's saying it doesn't, so I believe him.
It doesn't work anymore is actually the right phrasing of that.
Yeah.
It used to. By which I mean we didn't used to have paddles or Propedo or any of those things.
Yeah, but in future we can refactor Toothology so it can use pedals or some other database for managing.
Yeah.
Like we also have some idea here to use some log collection and log processing database instead of using the pedals. But anyway, the problem is pulpito is hardly using pedals. It's just web GUI for pedals, and you can't run any job without pedals. And this is a problem. Just no way.
I didn't realize we had all these all these other things because I wasn't looking at the pad. I was commuting. Sorry. So I think we should put this on hold maybe and move on to the rest of Nathan's topics.
Well, I'm not saying we have to go over it all today, but I
Well,
did
yeah,
want
but
I
I mean,
did
just
want to cover some other stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
So we could continue the integration testing. I mean, we have an actionable conclusion. I know how to. I've done pipization before, so that's something I could conceivably work on. So I'm happy that we're moving. This conversation has moved us 1 centimeter closer to integration testing.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. So interactive.
Oh no, there's one before that.
Sorry, filter.
Filter
Okay.
filter option appears to be broken by that $ thing. I opened an issue just to maybe if Zach or somebody could open that issue and look at it. And my idea there is I even at the very end of the description wrote my idea for how to fix it.
Oh,
It's impossible to use filter if the filter includes a $. It appears to me.
yeah, that's unfortunate.
Escaping doesn't work also, right?
All right. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, it's. Oh, you mean is it a bash thing?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Oh, that's an interesting point.
What's that?
Oh, that I have it in double quotes, and so maybe the $ is being interpreted by bash somehow.
Oh, that would be worth looking into.
I'm changing it to single quotes now and testing it.
Yeah, so, and if this does turn out to be a bug, the person who implemented that $ feature is Warren, so we can get him to look at it. Hopefully it's just a bash thing.
Nope, no. I put it in single quotes, and that doesn't help.
Okay.
Okay, and then how to use interactive. This is something that's been in. It's a tantalizing thing that's out there. I currently use, I insert a exex that runs sleep 10,000 or 10 million, as YAML, but as a task. But there's this interactive, and I would love to learn how to use it, but I don't.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
interactive exists from when we didn't have like scheduling with suites at all. And if it's a flag that Tutelology suite accepts, I think it's an error.
What do you mean it's an error?
Well, I mean, you can't do anything with it when it's being run by a worker process, right?
Well, yeah, if a scheduled job can't be
Yes.
interactive, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
So how
if
do you-
Tutelology suite takes it, then it's an error that it got plumbed through somehow.
Yeah.
So I mean, once
So
upon
it's
a
a-
time, Nathan, then
Yeah.
we didn't have suite or scheduling. We just like ran Tutelology with, YAML commands with YAML fragments on the command line, and then it went out and did that from like the bash shell you were running.
And so we can still do it that way then.
Yeah, you can still do that.
Yeah, you definitely can.
I mean, you need to have
Right.
your own locked machines, and then one of the YAML fragments you pass in is your targets that you'd better have locked, or things are going to go really wrong.
Okay,
yeah.
so use Tutelology lock to lock some machines, and then
Yeah,
and then
so
what?
And then just
So-
use Tutelology, like a straight Tutelology command with the YAML fragments you want.
So you would point, let's see, I'm gonna type on a line below the one you're on, just so I don't like
Cool.
overwrite what you're doing. So you do something like Teuthology -v -a my logs, and you would point it at you need a job configuration, right? What Teuthology Suite does when it schedules is it it pulls together all the YAML fragments that are relevant to the job and merges them into one object. So that's its
Yeah.
job configuration. So here
Right.
you would pass it, you'd pass it, the full job configuration, and then also point it at the targets, which can be embedded in the job configuration optionally, right? You can pass an arbitrary amount, a number of YAML files that just get merged together. So that target stanza we tend to keep separate just, for convenience. But it could be all one. And you do this from a terminal. And when it, if you could be using the interactive task or the interactive on failure, or I forget what that flag is called, option to, if it hits an unhandled exception, it'll drop you into the prompt. So then the job runs until the point at which it wants to be interactive, and then there's your interpreter.
Okay, so I was under the impression that it was a command line option.
Oh.
But Teuthology
Yeah,
doesn't have an interactive option.
Correct. It does not.
Teuthology does, or I think it's interactive on error, maybe.
Well,
No,
he's talking about a command line flag, which I don't think.
Yeah, no, they're definitely, unless it got killed. I don't think it got killed.
Oh, all right. I could be wrong. I thought we
Not
did.
listed in help. Teuthology help doesn't list interactive at all.
Maybe it's dead, but I'm pretty sure there's still an interactive. Well, once upon a time there was an interactive on error, so when you broke something, instead of ending, you could go and look at the running state of the system and see what you broke.
Yeah, but that's a job configuration item. I don't think it was ever a command line flag.
What I'm interested is interactive on both, either success or error.
Yeah. So then what you want to do is so if you want it to go interactive when something fails, then you use interactive on, I forget if it's interactive on error, I think. I have to check. If you want it to go interactive always at a certain point, then you insert the interactive task into the tasks list at the point where you want it to be interactive. So if you use both, then whichever happens first will happen. So if you get an error before the interactive task is invoked, then you'll get the prompt. And then when you exit out of that prompt, you should also get another prompt when the interactive task is invoked. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
So back to testing.
Sorry, what was that here?
So the unit test question regarding unit tests. So I've been trying to run it Pi27 talks target, and I figured out that the talks has a bug, and you can't run it from virtual environment because it's trying to reuse some components from the base system instead of virtual environment. But later I was trying to do this on Stan and OpenSUSE as well. So finally I got some success with it, and I was able to run it Pi27 on upstream, but I found that there are a lot of failures, but they are skipped. But anyway, they're trying to connect to Shaman, etc. It's not kind of unit test. It requires some infrastructure. Why if I want to run unit tests, it wants to connect to some other resources. So you probably need to split those into separate suites.
Probably what's happening, if you're running unit tests and they're trying to hit the network, then there's a bug in the tests. We need to just mock that out.
To be clear, it says that all tests are passed, but when I see in a log they are trying to connect to some just messages that some tests are failed and just skipped. I don't know why this effort is used.
Well, yeah, well, it's hard to know. I'd like to see what you're seeing, because one thing that you might be seeing is some tests do things they know won't work to verify that they won't work, right? So there are tests that generate error messages and then pass, and that's correct behavior. You might also be seeing bugs in tests, but it's hard to know without seeing.
So, okay, so they are just reporting that they are skipped because I don't know why, but anyway, it's better to discuss with logs, looking into the logs.
Yeah, my understanding was that that all of the tests passed, but then when you look closer, many tests are actually skipped. They don't run because they can't connect to the network.
Oh.
Yeah, something like this. Just I didn't get into much details, but anyway, if they are trying to connect to network, they shouldn't do this because I didn't ask them. So it's unit tests. It's not functional. It's not system tests. You know.
Yeah, again, without seeing it, it's hard to say. Maybe you found a bug. That's possible. Definitely agree that unit tests shouldn't be hitting the network, though.
Okay.
So the next one is the status of the OpenSUSE Leap images for Nepia Lab. Last week we had agreed that I would open issues and ping Taylor Galloway, and that happened. And now they're vacuuming in my office. Sorry for the noise. And then the last thing I had was, would it make sense to have an upstream Trello board? Maybe in the Ceph Trello thing for all of this Tuthology development that we're talking about. But we could move that to next week because we're already over 1 hour.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, let's talk about it, but maybe next week. For what it's worth, I'd be open to it. Doesn't sound like a bad idea at all. Let's see, the OpenSUSE log images. I think David he mentioned yesterday that he was going to work on that, so that'll get worked on. He's usually pretty fast with stuff, but he's also been dealing with some security stuff. We've had a lot of spammers in Redmine lately. That's been eating up some of his time to try to prevent that stuff from happening. But yeah, we'll get this done.
Yeah, I know about his work with the spammers. Sorry.
It's okay. You can't schedule vacuuming, not in an office environment.
And next week I'm on vacation the entire week.
Okay, cool.
So, but last week you were on vacation, Zach. But we were discussing this, and I told David already that for the OVH, and we generate OVH images for use with Toothology OpenStack. So I'm sure that we can provide the OpenSUSE image, OVH image to him, and he could put it wherever it needs to be put, and then try to use it. And probably that would get us 90% of the way.
Yeah, that sounds great. And he knows this, that you already build these images, or no?
Well, I wrote it to him in IRC, but he didn't respond to it. So I'll put it in as a note in the tracker.
Okay, all right.
But for the fog image, I'm a total know absolutely nothing about fog or cobbler, so I don't know how much of help I would be there. But if I can function as a trained monkey if I get commands, I can try to execute them.
Okay,
If
yeah.
that's
So
of any help.
just make sure he knows that if he needs some help, he could ask you, and you might be able to help. Yeah, setting up a fog image is mostly just getting a machine installed and then creating an image based on that installed machine. So I'm sure you can figure out how to install OpenSUSE.
Yeah, but the OVH image is more challenging, because it has to, be SSHable as Ubuntu, etc. So we already have that working, and
Great.
okay, thanks
Yep.
for the great discussion.
Yep. And
see you in 2
we
weeks.
were supposed to have someone telling about Flake today, but they had a family emergency come up, so it should be next week. Which
Gotcha.
help you, Nathan, but we'll have a recording. So.
Well, yeah, that wasn't the thing I was. I was.
Yeah.
It gets my blood, boiling.
All right.
But
Thanks, all.
it's good.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, one of the things that awaits us in the future is Python 3, right? So
Yeah,
if we're going to be refactoring for Python 3, we might as well refactor for Flake.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about this Flake stuff. Cool. Well, Nathan, have a great vacation.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys, and see you in 2 weeks.
Have fun. Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.